Right then guys, it's PSL here for my all 10 seasons of career mode video on F1 2018. I don't think I've ever had so many requests from so many different people just to make a single video. So I would like to thank all of you because these all seasons of career mode videos take a long time to make, so it's nice to know they are appreciated. This is the fourth all seasons of career mode video I've made. The other three have been on F1 2016, F1 2017 and even F1 2012. I'll leave a link to the all seasons of career mode playlist in the description as well as in the top right corner of the video now. I will be referencing the F1 2016 and F1 2017 all seasons videos over the course of this video. On top of that, I will also be referencing the other career mode which I ran on F1 2016, which I linked in a pinned comment on the F1 2016 All 10 Seasons video. That's because the variety of drivers and teams which were winning races and even championships was much wider than it was in my All Seasons video. Anyway, as I said, I will make the odd reference and comparison between this game's career mode as well as F1 2017's and even the two different career mode experiences I had on F1 2016. So if you want to understand where I'm coming from and see my exact experiences with recent F1 game career modes prior to this one, then you know where to look. I was hopeful that Codemasters had learned from F1 2016 and F1 2017's R&D systems and their problems to create one in F1 2018 that strikes a happy middle ground between the two game systems. That's sort of been achieved, but I still wouldn't say it's a perfect R&D system. So let's get into the career mode on this game. I started off with Williams for the same reasons I started with Sauber the past 2 years, and that's because they're the slowest team on the grid. As you can imagine, to have completed 10 entire seasons, write a multi-page script, edit and upload a video on this topic so soon after the game was released, I've taken a few shortcuts. I completed the practice programs at each Grand Prix to earn some resource points, and that is pretty much it. The qualifying sessions were almost always skipped over, although given the pace of the Williams car relative to the rest of the field, you can hardly blame me. The races were also usually simulated just to save time and progress through the 210 Grand Prix weekends as quickly as possible. One of the races I did compete in was the Italian Grand Prix, as I had a team goal to finish a race in 18th. And I wanted those resource points, so I took the matter in hand personally. It was a pretty crazy race with Leclerc, through no fault of his own I should add, taking out Hulkenberg whilst Leclerc was in the process of retiring from the race. I passed Ricciardo just because he was held in his pit box for so long. After the pit stop phase, myself and Perez were in a relentless battle for 9th place. The only thing that stopped the battle between us was when Sainz got involved, and suddenly, me and Sainz were duelling for 9th place. I overtook him going around to the final corner of the final lap to score my and Williams' first points of the season and career mode. Raikkonen won the Grand Prix in front of the Tifosi and led a Ferrari 1-2, followed by a Mercedes 3-4, and Verstappen finished in 5th, with Esteban Ocon in 6th as the best of the rest. Just before the Italian Grand Prix, I was notified of a potential rule change for the next season. Then, at the very next Grand Prix weekend, the rule changes for next season were confirmed to affect the durability and powertrain departments. Not that I had to worry, as I still hadn't bought a single upgrade for reasons which I'll talk about later on. What I will talk about now are the contracts and contract negotiations. To my knowledge, this is the first F1 game in which you can freely choose which teams to speak to once you've started your career mode. In the previous games, you either just had to wait for emails with offers from teams, or just pick from a small range of teams that your agent offers you. I like the greater freedom of team choice and the ability to create your own destiny. However, that is all kind of undermined by the fact that, well, in the first all 10 seasons game save, I was fired by Williams towards the end of season 2. This was, with the possible exception of an F1 Manager, the first time I had ever been fired in an F1 game. I actually love that it happened because it confirmed that the team's relationship with you does actually matter, and it also means that this game forces players to be somewhat worthy of keeping their seat. That's unlike every other Codemasters F1 game where you would either have to deliberately try to be fired or you simply couldn't. My appreciation for this was soon hollowed out though, as even though Williams didn't want anything to do with me, every other team did. They all thought I was brilliant even though I had consistently finished in last in the races, never qualified, and was near always thrashed by my teammate. Ferrari were most interested in me, but Mercedes, Red Bull, Renault, Force India and every other team apart from Williams would have happily taken me on board. The whole point of having to fight for your seat is made redundant when every other team always sees you as the second coming. Sauber, never mind Ferrari, had no reason to sign me. My form was atrocious, yet they were still interested in me. My issue isn't that I got fired because I thoroughly deserved it. My issue isn't even with why a F1 team was interested in signing me. It's why they all were. Aside from that, there's the new contract negotiation system, which, again, I like how you can set your own targets and negotiate specific perks. The system also feeds into the relationship you have with your team, so if you want all the high-end bonuses, then you better meet your target and perform well. Overall, it's a good change that gives extra control to the player and gives an extra incentive to try and get decent race results. My only issues with it are, why do you have to renegotiate your contract 4 times every season? That's overkill, surely. Also, that means, combined with the fact that every team except the one you're currently with near unconditionally loves you, I think you could race for 4 different teams every season. From a video game standpoint, I don't have an issue with it, but from a realism perspective, it doesn't work, and only goes further to undermining the fact that you have to work to earn your keep at your current team. Finally, there's the team goals. I like the addition of them as they give you an extra and more specific target to aim for and are an extra way of earning resource points. I would question how easy some of the easy team goals are given I was driving the slowest car on the grid, but all in all, it's a good addition to career mode. On to the rest of the first season. Vettel and Hamilton entered the Brazilian Grand Prix tied on points, so the result of this race was vital to the championship battle. I took part in the race to fulfill the completing a clean race team goal which I had at the point. Lewis started the race on pole and kept the lead until he came into the pits. Vettel pitted 1 lap later and rejoined just behind his championship rival. Bottas then caught up and started battling Vettel hard. This allowed Hamilton to pull off into the distance and win the Brazilian Grand Prix. Bottas lost the battle with Vettel, but certainly helped to win the war for his Mercedes teammate. So Hamilton had a 7-point lead with 1 race left to go, but Vettel could still take the championship, especially if he won the final round of the season. Although, if Vettel won and Hamilton came second, they would be tied on points, and the championship would come down to the finishing record of the 2 drivers. Well, I'll hold back the Abu Dhabi GP's race results for a second because let me just say that Vettel finished the final race of the season in 3rd. It sounds as if it's all over for him. Well, not exactly, as Hamilton finished in 6th, meaning he scored 7 points less than Vettel. So the first season ended with Hamilton and Vettel tied on 392 points. But Lewis Hamilton won the championship by virtue of the fact that he won 9 races over the course of the season and Vettel only won 7. So that was an incredibly close end to what would have been a thrilling season to watch were it real. Red Bull may have taken the 1-2 finish led by Max Verstappen at Abu Dhabi, but their two drivers still ended the season behind Raikkonen and Bottas. Hülkenberg was the best of the rest, and whilst Alonso and Sainz were next in terms of championship position, they both scored about half the points of Hülkenberg. Following them, it's both Haas drivers, then the two Force Indias, with myself next up on 2 points, and Brendan Hartley was the final driver to score a point. Stroll, Ericsson, Gasly, Leclerc, and most shockingly, Stoffel Van Dorn all scored no points. Alonso scored 58, yet Van Dorn didn't score any. The Constructors' Championship is largely spoken for, having already gone through the Drivers' Championship. But in short, Ferrari beat Mercedes by only 43 points, a 1-2 finishes worth of points. The one-man team of Alonso just got the better of Haas, and Sauber were the only team not to score any points, although Williams were quite lucky to have scored any points if I'm being honest. By the end of the season, the only changes in car performance from the start of the season were that McLaren passed Haas and Sauber passed Toro Rosso. That sounds dull, but actually it's far more interesting than it first seems. Red Bull closed the gap between themselves and Mercedes and Ferrari, which somewhat explains their 1-2 finish in Abu Dhabi. Renault have pulled away from the teams behind them, as have Force India. Most interestingly, throughout the majority of the season, Ferrari had a quicker car, or at worst, an equal car to Mercedes. Knowing that, it means that Lewis Hamilton's championship win is even more impressive, as he did it in what was quite often an inferior car to the one Vettel was in. Finally, you'll notice that ourselves at Williams have made no progress at all, and that's because I spent all of my resource points on the discount and quality control upgrades. I hadn't quite finished the setup for my long-term plans, but I will explain why I started off the career mode by standing still. Last year it was worked out by NevC on Reddit that on F1 2017 the cheapest way to progress through the career mode is to buy 2 quality control upgrades. Nothing like that has been produced for this game, but given how at its core F1 2018's R&D system is still mechanically similar to F1 2017's, it's probably a very similar story. I plan to run my own mini experiment, buying 5 quality control upgrades for the aerodynamic department, 2 for the chassis department, and none for the power department. However, for reasons which I'll get into later on, I wouldn't really look into what I experienced. So now it's on to the discounts, which cost a total of 7,000 resource points in all of the departments. The powertrain department is the one with the fewest number of upgrades for Williams to buy, and the total price for all of the powertrain upgrades with the discounts applied is 9,460 resource points. Now if you ignored the discounts and went straight into buying the upgrades at full price, you'd have to subtract the 7,000 resource point discount cost but double the upgrades back to their original cost price. That means the total cost to buy all of the powertrain upgrades for Williams goes up from 16,460 resource points to 18,920 resource points. So it's 2,460 resource points more expensive not to buy the discounts. And that's just in one department, and the gap is even bigger in the other 2 departments where there's more upgrades to buy. Also, that doesn't even take into account the upgrade failures or rule changes. Every time a part fails in development or needs to be adapted to meet a rule change, you have to pay. The price you pay is half of the item's cost price. So buying the discounts not only makes the upgrades cheaper to buy, but also cheaper to fix, cheaper to keep, and also cheaper to rebuy should you fail to adapt the upgrade in time for a rule change. So now that I've talked about that, let's get back into the racing action and see what happened as a result of the rule changes made between the end of Season 1 and the start of Season 2. Ferrari's overall car performance has actually gone down. Red Bull have the second quickest car on the grid, having passed Ferrari, but Mercedes start the season with the best car in F1. So into the first race in the second season, which I only mention because two criteria were fulfilled. Firstly, I took part in it, and secondly, it's rammed full of action. Most notably because Vettel locked up at the end of the second sector, which cost him a few places, and after rejoining into the path of Bottas sustained some damage and had to pit early on in the race. Later on, Bottas got involved in another incident at the very same corner, this time with a Red Bull, which gave him more front wing damage and sent him into the pits for a second time. Things got worse for Mercedes as Hamilton had an engine failure just as he was about to start the final lap of the race. That cost Hamilton what would have been a race win and gave it to Max Verstappen. Carlos Sainz in a Renault capitalised from all the chaos happening around him to finish in second, and Vettel took the final podium place. As you would expect, well, at least hope, the fastest lap times got slightly shorter this season as Ricciardo set the fastest lap of the race with a 1:23.5. Last season only two drivers got into the 1:23s, those drivers being Vettel and Hamilton, who actually set identical fastest laps. So all in all, the grid has got slightly faster this season. That is, except for Williams, who are actually slower. We haven't touched this car at all, yet somehow Lance Stroll was lapping about 0.4 of a second slower. I've heard it said before that if you're standing still in F1 then you're going backwards, but I didn't know it could be that literal. Yes, that was a simmed race in Season 1, and this season we actually took part in the race, but everyone is setting similar, if not better, pace, apart from ourselves. It would explain how Hartley in a Honda-powered Toro Rosso was able to pass me down the back straight, and even then, with our Mercedes engine and DRS, Hartley still pulled away from me on the main straight. No wonder the only drivers I beat were the ones who retired, Bottas who pitted twice, Gasly who suffered a puncture, and my own teammate. Just after the Monaco GP, I bought all of the discounts in all of the departments as well as all of the quality control upgrades I wanted. So finally I started the progression up the order, and now that upgrades are so cheap for me, I was able to buy 4 upgrades, albeit all minor ones, straight away. One quick and fascinating thing I want to mention is that Bottas beat Hamilton in a simmed German GP by only 37 thousandths of a second. If that were a real F1 race, it would have been the 4th smallest race winning margin ever in F1. Renault underperformed in a simmed Italian GP as they finished 8th and 9th, despite newly having the second quickest car on the grid and even the second best power unit. By the time we got to America, Williams had finally outdeveloped another team. So we're finally making forward movement, and we're doing it at a much quicker rate than you could on F1 2017, which I for one am very happy about. The American Grand Prix had much more important things than that going on because Lewis Hamilton wrapped up his second Drivers' Championship in this career mode. That would make Hamilton a 6 times world champion, only one away from Michael Schumacher's record of 7. Valtteri Bottas ensured it was a perfect day for Mercedes as he won the race, leading a Mercedes 1-2, which meant Mercedes secured the Constructors' Championship in Season 2. The second season ended with both Mercedes drivers at the top of the standings, trailed by the 2 Red Bull drivers, then the Ferraris, then the Renault boys, then the Force Indias, then the Haas drivers, and finally only 3 more drivers scored points. 1 each from McLaren, Sauber and Toro Rosso. Stoffel Vandoorne yet again ended the season pointless, but at least the gap between himself and his teammate is much smaller than in the first season. The Constructors' Championship is more or less already spoken for, but compared to last season, Ferrari dropped from 1st to 3rd, Force India passed Haas, and both of them bested McLaren. Also, Williams didn't score any points this season, but given how poor our car was at the start of the season, can you blame me? Looking at the vehicle performance comparison chart, you can see that Renault spent the final part of the season with the second fastest car, although you'd be forgiven for thinking that wasn't the case. By the end of the season, we had fitted over 30 upgrades, and we only started fitting upgrades after the Monaco Grand Prix just under a third of the way through the season. As you can see, Williams have the second slowest car, but we are on course to jump up the order a lot with all the upgrades that are being worked on during the off-season. Amazingly, all 6 of the upgrades that were being developed during the off-season didn't fail, and so, as you would expect, with 6 upgrades being fitted in one go, the jump in performance was meteoric. Williams now have the 5th quickest car on the grid, passing McLaren, Haas, and even Force India. We're still a fair way behind the top 4 group, occupied by the usual suspects, as well as Renault. Very strangely, Ferrari were the only team not to upgrade their car at all during the off-season. Between the Australian and Bahrain GPs was the very first time that an upgrade failed during development. Yes, we fitted 37 upgrades before this point, all of which were developed and fitted smoothly, but finally, one has failed. This was the first recording on version 1.07 of the game, and maybe that had something to do with it. Certainly the patch notes don't say anything about it, and whilst it could well be under the various other fixes, there's no way of knowing for sure. It just seems weird that none of the upgrades failed before I installed version 1.07. Granted, the aerodynamic parts were never going to fail because I had all of the quality control upgrades, but the other 20 or so parts had a chance of failing. Each of the powertrain upgrades had a 37.5% chance of failing, and the chassis upgrades had a 22.5% chance of failing each. I either got extremely lucky up to this point, or Codemasters buried the details of this glitch, hoping they had fixed it before anyone knew about it. After the French Grand Prix, 3 upgrades came in, so we overtook Renault to have the quickest car in Formula 1. However, it sure didn't seem like it, as in a simmed Austrian Grand Prix, the first race in which we ran with the quickest car on the grid, Stroll finished down in 6th and myself all the way down in 11th. I didn't even score a point with the quickest car on the grid. I took part in the Italian GP just so I could complete the hard team goal of finishing in 1st in a race and get myself an extra 600 resource points. I qualified in 1st place but dropped to 4th at the start as I was on the softs whilst everyone else was on the super softs. I later moved up to 2nd place and exited the pits in 3rd. After repassing Sainz, Verstappen and Hartley retired in what can only be described as a massive crash. Soon after that happened, I passed Bottas for 1st place, and then Hamilton passed Sainz for 3rd. So I won the Italian Grand Prix in Season 3, taking my first race win in this career mode, as well as Williams' first race win in this playthrough. Meanwhile, Lance Stroll had a much less exciting and successful race, as he finished in 6th place. The second we arrived in Singapore, we were notified of rule changes for next season, which this time will impact the chassis and aerodynamic departments. I deliberately stopped buying upgrades a few races back, as I was warned in an email that we were going to have another multi-department rule change. Because of that, I was able to adapt most of my aero upgrades straight away. We have 20 out of 25 chassis upgrades and 21 out of 25 aerodynamic upgrades. That's a hell of a lot of adapting to do. For the second season in a row, Lewis Hamilton won the Drivers' Championship at the American Grand Prix, and not only that, Mercedes also secured the Constructors' Championship during the very same race. Come the end of the season, Lewis Hamilton led the Drivers' Championship with a 127 point gap. That's just over 5 race wins worth of points, over Nico Hülkenberg, who finished as the runner-up. Carlos Sainz also did well as he finished in 5th, being beaten by Bottas and Ricciardo, but he bested Sebastian Vettel by 9 points. Raikkonen had a shocker of a season as he ended it down in 11th, just 1 place ahead of me. Van Dorn yet again didn't score any points, and neither did Marcus Ericsson, both Toro Rosso drivers, and even Kevin Magnussen. Yes, Haas have really fallen down the order as they only scored 3 points all season, but that's still 1 more than Sauber. Williams finished the season in 6th, with Force India 5th, Ferrari 4th, Red Bull 3rd. Renault have made big strides forward to finish in 2nd, but were still some 227 points behind the champions, Mercedes. I was able to adapt all of my existing chassis and aero upgrades before the end of the season, and I even bought a brand new chassis upgrade for the next season. So whilst every other team will likely lose performance heading into the following season, we will likely gain performance. Speaking of which, by the end of the season we had the quickest car by some margin. Mercedes were slightly ahead of Renault, who were ahead of Red Bull in 4th, and then it's Force India who have the 5th quickest car in F1, and Ferrari, who once upon a time had the quickest car in F1, now only have the 6th best. The upgrade I bought failed during development, and the rule changes rather annoyingly brought the field back closer to where it all started off. Our lead in the tech race is now massive due to everyone else losing ground, but Red Bull lost the least and now have the next best car. Ferrari have passed Mercedes again, Force India have fallen back behind Ferrari, and Renault have dropped massively, falling back behind the big 3 teams. Looking at the graph, Ferrari lost by far the least performance, excluding us, but that's probably because they had the least to lose in the first place. If only the vehicle performance graph actually reflected the on-track performances of each of the teams, as in Australia myself and Stroll finished in 8th and 9th. It's a notable result, partially because we did so badly in what is meant to be the best car on the grid, partially because I actually beat Stroll in a simmed race, which almost never happens, and partially because this was the first simmed race in this career mode in which both myself and Stroll scored points. Renault took a 1-2 led by Nico Hülkenberg despite no longer having even the 2nd quickest car in F1. Red Bull took a 3-4 finish, which at least makes a lick of sense. Then it's a Ferrari 5-6, and the 2 Williams drivers split the 2 Mercedes boys as Hamilton ended the race in 7th and Bottas in 10th. Meanwhile, both McLaren drivers finished down at the bottom end of the grid as they now run the slowest car in the field. In a simmed Azerbaijan GP, we finally got our sim pace mostly together as Lance Stroll finished in 2nd and myself in 6th. In a simmed Monaco GP, Lance Stroll won. That's his first race win in this career mode. Then in a simmed Austrian GP, we had the team's first 1-2 finish, with Lance winning the race and myself in 2nd. Behind us were both Red Bulls, Hamilton, then Raikkonen. After this race, Lance took the lead of the Drivers' Championship away from Vettel. For the Belgian Grand Prix, McLaren passed Haas and Toro Rosso in the development race, so now Haas have the slowest F1 car. During the Japanese Grand Prix, the rule changes for next season were announced, and they will affect the durability department. But as I don't have any durability upgrades, that's brilliant for me. I took part in the Japanese Grand Prix, but really just so I was able to watch back what happened during this defining race. Lance Stroll started 3rd on the grid and soon passed Hamilton for 2nd. Soon afterwards he passed Sebastian Vettel to take the lead of the race. A move which wasn't necessary as it turned out, because Vettel soon retired from the race after making a botched move on Ocon whilst going around 130R. I hate to say it, but it does remind me of how the real-life Japanese Grand Prix played out for Vettel. As a result of Lance Stroll's race win, he won the Drivers' Championship. That's the earliest anyone has won a Drivers' Championship in this game save, as he took the title with 4 races left to go. And then just 1 race later, Williams wrapped up the Constructors' Championship. That's one heck of a turnaround we've made, even just over the course of this season, never mind over the past 4 seasons. In Abu Dhabi, I followed Stroll home to take another 1-2 finish for Williams, and also, by beating Hamilton in the race, I passed him in the Drivers' Championship, meaning Williams have taken a 1-2 in the Drivers' standings. Hamilton ended the season in 3rd and only beat Vettel by 2 points, and even Daniel Ricciardo was only 15 points away from Hamilton's total. Both Renault drivers finished behind the Merc, Ferrari, Red Bull and Williams drivers, and after them it's Perez and then both Sauber drivers who outscored Esteban Ocon in the other Force India. Pierre Gasly was the final driver to score a point, meaning his teammate Brendan Hartley, as well as both Haas and McLaren drivers, including Fernando Alonso, all scored no points all season. We already know Williams won the Constructors' Championship, but surprisingly it was Red Bull who took the 2nd place spot, showing the importance of having 2 drivers who are fighting at the front, rather than just one as is the case at Ferrari and Mercedes. The rest of the Constructors' Championship has already been spoken for, except that Sauber did exceptionally well as they outscored Force India by a point. As you can see, Ferrari ended the season with the 2nd quickest car, but the reality of the running order this season isn't that simple. Red Bull spent most of the early season with the next best car in F1, but Renault and Mercedes also had brief spells of having the 2nd quickest car, and that group of 4 teams is still very tightly grouped. All of that means Renault's lack of points compared to Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull is inexcusable. Undoubtedly though, apart from Williams, Sauber were the biggest movers this season, as they are almost leading that Formula 1.5 group, as I think it's been referred to by some Formula 1 drivers in real life. But Toro Rosso, amazingly, of all the teams, are on top of that secondary group. Rule changes for Season 6 were rumoured about as early as the German Grand Prix and were confirmed during the weekend of the Belgian Grand Prix. The reason it all happened so early on in the season was because they planned to change the rules governing the powertrain, chassis and aerodynamic departments. So every single performance upgrade is under threat in every single team. But we're in the worst position as I bought the final few upgrades at the start of the season. So I didn't take part in any practice programs all season, as I saw very little reason to take part in the practice programs to invest my time just to make my resource point balance bigger. But with all 69 upgrades under threat, I suddenly had to start completing the practice programs, just so I could save these upgrades whilst they were still fitted onto the car. We got some good news shortly after that though. Williams won the Season 5 Constructors' Championship in Italy. That means we took the title with 7 races still to run, and I don't think a Constructors' Championship has ever been won that many races before the end of a season. For the 2nd season in a row, Lance Stroll won the Drivers' Championship at Suzuka, meaning Lance Stroll is a double world champion off of my hard work. Sure, he's been getting the race results, but this car would still be awful if it wasn't for me, so his championships are as much down to me as they are to him. At the end of the season, myself and Lance finished at the top of the table, with Nico Hülkenberg next in line after beating Hamilton by 9 points. Sebastian Vettel didn't even break the 200-point barrier, and then it's an even bigger jump down to Ricardo Bottas and then Carlos Sainz. I have to say, Carlos Sainz has always been second fiddle to Hülkenberg in this career mode. That is, unless I actually run the race myself, in which case Sainz usually does brilliantly and even better than his teammate. Sainz is suffering from the same issue that meant Palmer never raced at the sharp end of the grid in the all 10 seasons of career mode video on F1 2017. That is, despite the fact that Hulkenberg was getting podium finishes in the final season of that career mode. Well, I speculated that there must be some sort of driver 1-2 structure in the game, and essentially there was. Arava tweeted this out back in April. As you can see, the programmed in pace gap between the Williams and Renault teammates is much greater than it is with any other team. So Palmer was consistently disadvantaged in the game. And I think the same thing is affecting Carlos Sainz in this game when, as far as I'm concerned, it shouldn't. Also, remember earlier on when Van Dorn was having pointless seasons, whilst Alonso was scoring tens of points a season. Well, that's very similar to how it was on F1 2017, both in programming and in actuality. Anyway, at the bottom end of the drivers' standings, a record 8 drivers all failed to score points. The more shocking drivers being Romain Grosjean, Esteban Ocon, although to be fair, Perez only scored 1 point all season, and one Mr. Fernando Alonso, who had his first pointless season in this career mode. The Constructors' Championship is easily worked out just by looking at the driver standings, but just to be clear, Renault scored 483 points less than Williams, and more surprisingly, only 4 more than Mercedes. Red Bull only beat Ferrari by 12 points, but going back to the Renault versus Mercedes battle, Renault had the second quickest car almost all season long, and due to the extensive rule changes coming next season, everyone flatlined in developing their cars not long after the midway point in the season. Because of that, Renault's position as having the next best F1 car was set in stone for the final rounds of the season, yet they only beat Mercedes by 4 points. That's pretty disappointing for Renault and shows that maybe the game holding Hulkenberg in such high regard and thus giving Sainz nothing to work with is actually harming the team as a whole. I was able to adapt all of my powertrain and chassis upgrades, but only 5 of the 25 aerodynamic upgrades. I left the aero department until last because it is the one that has all of the quality control upgrades. So I knew that when I would have to repurchase the upgrades, they wouldn't fail on me, unlike with the chassis or powertrain upgrades, where they could and almost inevitably would fail a few times. The rule changes hit everyone hard, but all it's done, like on previous occasions, is revert the field back closer to how it all started off. Okay, sure, Williams being at the very top and McLaren at the very bottom are exceptions, but other than that, all the rule changes have done is revert the pecking order back to how it was 5 seasons ago. Let's just cut to the chase. Lance Stroll won the 6th season's Drivers' Championship, meaning he is now a triple world champion. Both Hamilton and Stroll have won 3 Drivers' Championships in this career mode, but what's interesting is that Stroll took this title as the Singapore Grand Prix 6 races before the end of the season and 2 races earlier than he won his previous championships. That's because his nearest championship rival for a long time, Sebastian Vettel, made a lot of mistakes which extended Stroll's championship lead at a much faster rate than normal. Firstly, at the Spanish Grand Prix, Vettel started on pole position but ended the race all the way down in 8th. And that was a simmed race, so who knows how it happened, especially as at every race prior to that one, Vettel finished in 2nd and just behind Stroll. Then at the French Grand Prix, Vettel finished in 5th and was beaten by me as well as both Mercedes drivers. Ferrari still had the 2nd quickest car, so I don't know why Vettel's pace plummeted after only 4 races in the season. But the final nail in the coffin, and the one which allowed Stroll to take the title so early on, was that in Singapore, Vettel had grid penalties, and unfortunately I took part in the race just so I could see Stroll's title winning celebrations. By me taking part in the race, it meant Vettel had to actually overtake those drivers the hard way, whereas if the race was simmed, your starting position has no bearing on your finishing position, even at a circuit like this one. I actually won a simmed Mexican Grand Prix, making that not only one of the few times I won a simmed race, but one of the very few times I beat Lance Stroll in a simulated race. You know what I was saying earlier about the pace gap between teammates? Well, this game is very different to its predecessors when it comes to how it ranks yourself versus your teammate in simmed races. On F1 2017, the team I was with, Sauber, won 69 consecutive races, and only one of those wins came from Wehrlein, and even then, that was only due to my car having too much wear to finish the race. It's not a complaint or a compliment that F1 2018 has reversed the bias between yourself and your teammate in simmed races. Just an observation. Although I will say that it does make actually winning a Drivers' Championship have more value because you actually have to work for it and do it yourself, not just press a few buttons and have the game say you won. Anyway, the 6th season ended like this. Lance Stroll scored 518 points, only 7 less than the maximum a driver can score in a 21 race season. That's some level of dominance right there. Sebastian Vettel had a far from perfect, but even still decent season as he finished as the runner-up, beating the likes of myself, Hamilton, Ricciardo and his teammate Raikkonen in descending order. Sergio Perez and Charles Leclerc were the two standout drivers this season as they finished 9th and 10th respectively. Once again, one of the Toro Rosso drivers had a pointless season. This time it was Brendan Hartley, and both Haas and McLaren drivers also failed to score any points. Williams won the 3rd Constructors' Championship on the bounce, making them the most successful team in this career mode to date. Ferrari finished as the season's runner-up, Red Bull finished in 3rd and beat Mercedes by exactly 50 points. Renault finished in 5th, but scored a whopping 327 fewer points than Mercedes. That's 26 in total, which is only 1 more than Force India and 5 more than Sauber. What a fall from grace Renault have had as a result of the mid-career mode rule changes that effectively reset the grid back to square one again. Ferrari may have beaten Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship, but Red Bull end the season with the quicker cars, so are looking in good shape for the following season. Sauber have done an amazing job ever since every department suffered a rule change for this season, as Sauber now have the 5th quickest car. That means Sauber somehow developed their car quicker than the multi-million euro automotive giant of Renault. It's a great accomplishment, but meaningless as Renault still beat Sauber last season, and before we've even turned a wheel in Season 7, Renault have repassed Sauber in the development race. As the Italian GP, the future rule changes were confirmed to affect the durability and aerodynamic departments. I didn't take part in a single session all season, with the exception of the race where the Drivers' Champion was crowned. Yet I was still able to instantly adapt all of our aerodynamic upgrades and almost all of the durability upgrades I owned, as I had amassed 7,815 resource points by this point in the career mode. As Ferrari and Red Bull developed their car to get closer and closer to our car, but not past it, they started beating us in races regularly. So much so that Sebastian Vettel won his first Drivers' Championship in this career mode, and he did it at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, 2 races before the end of the season. The most interesting part of the Mexican Grand Prix wasn't Vettel's championship win. It was Charles Leclerc's performance. Charles Leclerc qualified in his Sauber in 3rd position, and in the race took it toe-to-toe with his future teammate Sebastian Vettel, and Leclerc came out on top, albeit only briefly. It's a great story, and frankly it's exactly what I want to see once you get 7 entire seasons into an F1 game career mode, an originally backmarker team battling with one of the founding frontrunners. Later, Lance Stroll, who started the race in 7th, caught up and overtook Charles Leclerc. Again, another thing I love to see late on in a career mode. 2 former backmarker teams dicing for a podium spot. The final noteworthy moment of many from this Mexican Grand Prix was that Ferrari secured the Constructors' Championship, only their second one in this career mode. Come the end of the season, Vettel topped the standings with Stroll in 2nd and Raikkonen in 3rd. Then you've got the 2 Red Bull drivers, led by Ricciardo, before you get to myself in 6th. Hamilton finished in 7th, and then it's Charles Leclerc who had a fantastic season, even beating the Mercedes man of Valtteri Bottas. Charles' teammate Marcus Ericsson scored some points, but only 2. And you can also see that relationship with the Force India and Renault drivers, as both Hülkenberg and Perez beat Sainz and Ocon by some margin. Lastly, both Toro Rosso, Haas and McLaren drivers all scored no points all season, and so that explains 30% of the Constructors' Championship straight away. In fact, the Constructors' Championship has already been pretty much explained already, but I will point out that Williams still finished in 2nd, and most interestingly, Sauber ended the 7th season in 5th, only 1 place behind Mercedes and 1 place ahead of Renault. The vehicle performance graph at the end of the season is even more interesting than the championship results. Mercedes ended the season with only the 6th fastest car, as both independent teams of Force India and Sauber outdeveloped the Formula 1 and motoring juggernaut. I'd love to talk about how exciting this makes the 8th season, but due to the aerodynamic rule changes, Force India dropped a lot of ground, and in fact, themselves and Ferrari were the only teams to lose performance from the end of Season 7 to the start of Season 8. So Red Bull started the season with the 2nd quickest car, still a fair way behind us. And Mercedes re-overtook Force India, but not Sauber, who now have the 4th best performing car in the Formula 1 world. As the Singapore GP, yet another rule change was announced, and this time it was the chassis department which was reset for the following season. Again, even though I didn't take part in a single session all season, except the race in which the Drivers' Championship was won, I was still able to adapt all of our chassis upgrades instantly thanks to my 8,827 resource point stash. As the Russian Grand Prix, we still have the quickest car, albeit only just. That wasn't reflected in the simmed race results, as Sebastian Vettel beat myself and even Stroll all season long, and Vettel won the Drivers' Championship in the USA, despite the fact that Raikkonen won the American Grand Prix and even Hamilton beat Vettel to 2nd by the most minuscule of margins. On the short run from the final corner to the start-finish line, Hamilton drove alongside and then passed Vettel. Well, far enough ahead of him to take 2nd by only 34 thousandths of a second. The Brazilian GP was the first race in a very long time in which neither Williams driver scored a point, and in the simmed race, I came last. Yes, every team has been catching us up in terms of development, and Ferrari had literally only just outdeveloped us. But we still allegedly had the 2nd fastest car on the grid. Sure doesn't feel like it from where I or even Lance are standing. The season ended with a Ferrari 1-2 in the drivers' standings, then a Red Bull 3-4 and a Mercedes 5-6, with Vettel, Ricciardo and Hamilton all beating their respective teammate. Stroll ended the season in 7th, despite the fact we had the quickest car for almost the entirety of the season. Leclerc had an impressive season yet again as he finished in 8th, with Perez 9th, myself in 10th, and Ocon did better than you would expect compared to his teammate as he finished in 11th. Hulkenberg only scored 19 points, but that's 19 more than Sainz, who scored no points all season. Or to put that in context, compared to another number 2 driver, 2 fewer points than what Marcus Ericsson cobbled together. Sainz joined both Toro Rosso, McLaren and Haas drivers, who, yet again, scored no points all season long. In the final race of the season, Force India passed Sauber to take 5th place in the Constructors' Championship, the spot just behind Williams. Aside from that, everything else is self-explanatory, but I will just vocalise that Ferrari scored 813 points, which is an enormous total for one team to accrue in just one season. Force India worked hard on their car over the course of the season, even passing Sauber in the car development race. Shame then that they lost so much ground again as a result of a rule change. The chassis department's rule change meant every team took a performance hit, except for Williams, as we were easily able to preserve all our upgrades, but we still have what is supposedly the second fastest car. McLaren actually gained performance during the off-season, but I guess they had so little to lose in the first place that a rule change could only really work out to their benefit, and in this case it allowed them to catch up and pass Haas and Toro Rosso. I took part in the qualifying and race for the Canadian Grand Prix only because my relationship with the team was so bad after underperforming in simmed races with the best/second best car for so long. If I didn't do anything, then I would have been fired just like I was in the second season of my initial run through of the 10 seasons. I qualified in second, just behind Raikkonen and ahead of Vettel, but it didn't take long for Vettel to overtake me once the race started. Ocon started the race in 4th, but Stroll soon passed him to make it a Williams free fall. This proves that the game had really underrated Williams, as we've had the second quickest car all season so far, but the simmed race results don't suggest that for a second. Also, what it must mean is that if I actually took part in all the races last season, back when we still had the quickest car, Stroll or myself probably would have won the championship, not Vettel. The race ended with a predictable Ferrari 1-2, albeit led by Raikkonen, and then it was a Williams 3-4 led by me. Charles Leclerc was the highest finishing non-Ferrari or Williams driver, as he came across the line in 5th, and he even had to pass Bottas in the Mercedes out on track to do that. Once again, Charles Leclerc has pulled off a truly great drive and brought home a fantastic race result for himself and Sauber. It was at the Hungarian Grand Prix when Sauber, of all the teams, out-developed us. As the Italian Grand Prix, Red Bull suddenly came in with the quickest car, passing ourselves, Sauber and Ferrari. I took part in the Italian Grand Prix yet again just to better my relationship with the team and avoid getting the sack. All I will say about this race is that an unneeded safety car bunched the field back up after the pit stop period. When it came in, Raikkonen went to pass his teammate, Vettel cracked under the pressure, locked up and rejoined into the path of Lewis Hamilton, which gave Hamilton front wing damage and meant he came into the pits. That sent Hamilton out of the points places and he couldn't re-enter them before the checkered flag came out. Red Bull may have under-delivered in what is meant to be the fastest car in F1, but Sauber did a fantastic job as Leclerc finished in 5th again, but Ericsson came home in 6th and he worked for it. Both Sauber drivers overtook the Red Bulls after the safety car came in, and Marcus Ericsson tried to re-establish himself as equal to Leclerc, as the two drivers were certainly closely matched in this race and battled each other hard come the final lap. Ferrari won their 4th Constructors' Championship in this career mode as the Russian Grand Prix, 5 races before the end of the season, and that makes them the most successful team in this career mode. Then just 1 race later, Mercedes out-developed us. I should say, because I fitted every upgrade seasons ago, I physically can't make the car any quicker. All I can do, much like on F1 2016 and F1 2017, is just wait and watch every other team catch up and outdevelop me again. Rule changes don't do much in this situation other than drop every other team back behind me again, and because I have so many resource points, even after abandoning doing the practice programs seasons ago, I can protect all of my upgrades no problem, so rule changes always work out to my benefit. Sebastian Vettel won his third Drivers' Championship in a row in this career mode. Rather interestingly, the first 3 seasons were all won by Hamilton, then the next 3 by Stroll and the last 3 by Vettel. So it's 3 titles apiece between them, meaning the 10th and final season is the tiebreaker. Come the end of the season, the Drivers' Championship read like this. Both Ferrari drivers on top and followed by both Red Bulls, then both Mercedes, and next it's Charles Leclerc in 7th. Stroll came 8th, Perez 9th, Ocon 10th, and myself in 11th, with Ericsson in 12th and Alonso in 13th, just ahead of both Renault drivers. Both Haas drivers and Brendan Hartley were the only drivers who didn't score a point this season. Ferrari won the Constructors' Championship, but Red Bull closed the points gap in the second half of the season. Mercedes finished in 3rd, Sauber 4th, Williams 5th, Force India 6th, McLaren 7th, Renault 8th, Toro Rosso 9th with a single point, and Haas down in 10th with 0 points. We ended the 9th season with the 6th fastest car, as Force India have even passed us by this point. There's no rule changes coming in for the final season, so this is as good as it gets. Every team will outdevelop us at some point, and amazingly Sauber already have. It's just a case of when the other bottom half teams will outdevelop us, not if. And in the transition period between Season 9 and Season 10, every other team did pass us except for Haas, who have been undoubtedly the worst team in this career mode. Red Bull still have the fastest car, as neither themselves nor Ferrari fitted any upgrades during the off-season. Neither did Williams or Sauber, but I know for a fact we've reached our maximum level of performance, and I'd be staggered if Sauber haven't as well. In fact, I was very surprised that Sauber's maximum performance level is so much higher than Williams, considering the gap between those teams as the start of Season 1 isn't that big. Well, that's because back when I started the career mode on the 31st of August and on only version 1.04 of the game, Williams and Sauber had a similar level of overall pace. But later updates changed the performance level of each of the teams, with the only noteworthy change being that McLaren and Force India swapped places. Maybe the reason Sauber did so well in this career mode was because whilst I progressed through the career mode, Sauber's performance got boosted in that version 1.06 update, and somehow that affected their pace in this pre-existing career mode save. Maybe it's just a coincidence, but a similar coincidence happened in my F1 2017 All 10 Seasons video, where Williams dropped in performance soon after the sports update was released, which altered teams' performance levels. Could just be a coincidence, could not be, but there's no way of saying for sure. I took part in the 10th and final Australian Grand Prix just so I could improve my reputation amongst the Williams crew and avoid getting sacked. There was also a team goal to complete a clean race, which again, by achieving that, my reputation with the team improved. The only reason I bring this race up though is because Brendan Hartley finished in 6th place. That is, I believe, Toro Rosso's best finish all career mode, as that team has constantly struggled to score points across a season, but here they got 8 in one race. Every team flatlined in car development by the halfway point of the season, but Haas did outdevelop us by the Canadian Grand Prix to send Williams back down to where we started. In of itself, the lack of development in the final season isn't strange, but what is that presuming every team has fitted every upgrade, because there's no reason why they would stop developing their car, the maximum performance level of each of the teams isn't in the same order as the starting performance levels. Ferrari start off with the best car, but Red Bull have the potential to build a better one, and I don't think there's anything Ferrari can do to stop that. Mercedes also end up with a marginally quicker car than Ferrari despite starting behind them. Haas drop behind Force India from the start to the end, and Sauber can jump McLaren and Toro Rosso. I guess that explains how Sauber were able to do so well in this career mode, at least compared to what you'd expect them to be able to do. And it also goes some way to explaining why Haas and McLaren consistently struggled. That's because the end performance levels are biased against Haas and McLaren, but beneficial for Sauber, Force India, and above everyone else, Red Bull. Red Bull made use of their endgame performance advantage, and after Max Verstappen won the Japanese Grand Prix with Hamilton 2nd, Ricciardo 3rd, Raikkonen 4th, and Vettel all the way down in 6th, Red Bull overtook Ferrari to lead the Constructors' Championship. Max then won the Mexican Grand Prix with his teammate down in 5th, but more importantly, with Vettel finishing the race in 4th, Verstappen took the lead of the Drivers' Championship with just 2 races left to go. The Drivers' title was decided in Abu Dhabi, and it all started off well for Vettel, as he started from 2nd on the grid, but soon passed Hamilton to take the all-important race lead. But then it all kicked off as Sebastian Vettel suffered a puncture whilst leading this championship deciding race. The puncture damaged his title chances immensely, but then 3 separate but connected crashes took Hülkenberg, Grosjean, Stroll and Vettel out of the race for good. And so, in dramatic circumstances, Max Verstappen won the 10th and final season's Drivers' Championship, making him the 4th different driver to have won the title in 10 years. Force India ended their time in this career mode strongly as Ocon avoided the destruction to take the final podium spot, and even Perez finished in 6th. Meanwhile, I ended my 210 race career scoring 1 final point for Williams. Verstappen took the title by 14 points, beating Vettel who won the previous 3 championships in a row. I guess that means Vettel and Hamilton end this career mode both as 7 times world champions, equal to Michael Schumacher. Vettel did still beat Ricciardo who had the quickest car all season, unlike Vettel who only had the 3rd best. Alonso somehow had his best season right at the end, and what a season it was. 7th in the standings and with 102 points. Compare that to both Force India drivers who only have a few more points than him combined. Renault must be wishing for their brief glory days from earlier seasons to return, as their drivers finished behind both Force India's but ahead of Leclerc. Finally, there's both Toro Rosso's, then Magnussen, Ericsson, myself, Grosjean, Stoffel Van Dorn who has exactly 100 points fewer than his teammate, and finally at the bottom of the table is triple world champion Lance Stroll, the only driver who didn't score a point during this season. The final season's Constructors' Championship ends as so. Red Bull beat Ferrari by 52 points, but Mercedes, who had the 2nd quickest car for most of the season, a quicker car than Ferrari it should be noted, was still beaten by Ferrari by 130 points. McLaren and Force India tied on 104 points, but McLaren won out by virtue of Alonso's spellbinding season, which saw him enter the season above both Perez and Ocon in the Drivers' Championship. Renault ended the final season in 6th, Sauber 7th, Toro Rosso 8th, Haas 9th, and lastly Williams in 10th, back where we started. One of the more common comments I've received in my previous all seasons of career mode videos is how does the career mode end? Well, in this game, it just does. You load back to the desk with the laptop, you can't view anything on there anymore, which is a shame as it means you can't see the full race by race results for the 10th season. You then click end career, the usual end of season screen pops up, and that's it. The credits roll and that's it, end game. There's no fanfare, no celebration. And whilst that was also the case in the previous games, even F1 2017 gave you a small ending message. Even that doesn't happen on F1 2018. So that's everything. 10 seasons, 210 Grand Prix, 4 different world champions from 4 different teams, and we even had 4 different constructors win the Constructors' Championship. Not to mention that teams outside of the top 3 were able to break in and fight amongst them. Renault had a run up there, Force India did very briefly, and most notably, Sauber even muscled their way in. I certainly think the R&D system is better than it was in F1 2017, as now teams can actually out-develop one another, which wasn't really the case last year, and I think the only team that broke into the top 3 group last year, aside from Sauber who I was with, was Renault. And when I say Renault, I really just mean Hulkenberg. The speed at which teams can now improve is great, and the wider variety of development speed by the teams allows teams such as Sauber to pull off these amazing feats that make the career mode more interesting. Okay, sure, it wasn't until the 8th season that Sauber were fighting as the front, and I'm sure only a minority of players will play that far, but I'm still glad teams could massively exceed themselves, unlike on F1 2017. That is until you hit your team's glass ceiling. And that's the thing, Williams have to get to the front quickly, because if Ferrari exceeds Williams' performance limit before Williams reach it, then Williams can't possibly beat Ferrari or any other team that has crossed that point in the vehicle performance chart. Sure, the rule changes help to stop that happening, but all they end up doing is just reverting the grid order back to where it started. Renault were battling up the sharp end of the grid before rule changes dropped them behind the big 3 of Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari. Renault has the most to lose of all those teams because they had to fit more upgrades than the big 3 teams just to get into that position. The same thing happened to Force India, and it could have happened to Sauber. The rule changes, combined with the fact everyone has a set minimum and maximum performance level, means the pecking order doesn't stray too far away from how it is in real life for too long. A better solution would be to remove the glass ceiling that the teams suffer and make every team have the same potential maximum performance. Or add in a base chassis rating for each team which changes at random from season to season. Or maybe you can choose to invest in your chassis to get a better starting platform each season and the upgrades go on top of that. So maybe the maximum performance level of each team is determined by your base chassis rating, and how you invest in chassis could work similarly to how it does on the Motorsport Manager mobile games. Maybe you could also limit the number of upgrades a team can buy a season, which would make it more realistic in terms of the sheer volume of upgrades a team can make per season, as well as the scale of performance changes that can occur mid-season. I'm just brainstorming here because without another major change to how the career mode works, this system just won't ever be perfect in my book. Keep the rule changes as they're a good addition for changing up the pecking order a lot from season to season, giving you something else to consider and for prolonging the active lifespan of car development. However, remove the personalised performance limits for each of the teams, or at least give the players greater control over that, because otherwise the rule changes will simply wipe out the progress made by the likes of Renault and Force India, and will always save the likes of Mercedes, who have the least to lose in the first place. At one point in this career mode, Mercedes had the 6th fastest car. Yes, they were likely preparing for the following season's rule changes, which was smart in the long term. But Mercedes was still slacking compared to the other teams, and I would love to have seen that trend continued. However, the rule changes meant that realistically, Mercedes could only benefit from something that brings the grid back closer to where it all started, because this career mode started with Lewis Hamilton winning 3 titles in a row. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this comprehensive and mega all 10 seasons of career mode video, filled with the championship standings and updates on car developments that you wanted to know, with an added dash of interesting racing moments, on-track battles, and huge crashes never before seen in an all seasons of career mode video. And I think I've also explained my thoughts on everything new and interesting in F1 2018's career mode, and let's hope that the next F1 game has a career mode R&D system that is that bit better. F1 2016's was wild, crazy, and over in a heartbeat. F1 2017's was slow, never changing, and boring, and it was certainly improved in almost every aspect for F1 2018. If that level of improvement continues, then the next F1 game will have an amazing career mode.